Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of AVD Monthly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got Greg Roberson with me as always. Greg, how's it going? Greg, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm doing great. Got a couple of new things I'm happy to talk about today.
Yeah, it's good. I honestly, I really do look forward to this one because that's the best way I keep up with the AVD world and hearing your insights. And then I'm always curious to see what Nerdio's done to take it to the next level. I have no doubt that the team over there has been working away to keep rounding out the edges. Is that a fair way to look at it?
It's a very accurate way of looking at it. We've added some customer enhancement requests in this next release, as well as some public preview options. A big one at that we'll go over.
Well, we've got an hour scheduled here. I'm looking at the AVD updates, and there's only about 5 of them, so it won't take long. And then we'll go over to the Nerdio world and see what you guys have been up to.
All right.
Yeah, I had a visual in my head, rounding out the edges, and AVD started off with some really blunt edges. They've kind of softened those a little bit, and they're more like maybe like an octagon at this point, maybe more than octagon. I'm not I used to be a geography guy, but I'm not anymore. I don't know what's bigger than an octagon, but I'm sure there's still plenty of edges that need to be rounded out. And to be frank, I don't think that there'll ever be a time where there's not edges in AVD to round out. What do you think?
There's always going to be some edges to round out because Microsoft provided a nice platform for VDI, but we also know that there's been 2 other players in the market for a lot longer than Microsoft has been and have a lot more options. Now, I may not expect to see them offer all of the custom options that the other players have offered, but they still have a little bit of ways to go to try to, even that playing field, which they've done quite well in the last 6 months.
Well, and then the other part is those pesky users, those customers keep coming up with new ideas and things they wanted to do.
You're right about that. One of the ones I hear all the time, it'll be nice to see, but I'm not terribly hopeful that it'll ever happen, is an updated RDP client with better graphics performance.
And I just assumed that was happening. Let's take a little sidebar on 2 topics real quick. One is the RDP client being better and lighter and evolving and having more channels and capabilities to it. I'm under the impression that Microsoft has secret RDP sauce, RDP meaning remote desktop presentation protocol, or maybe it's remote desktop protocol. But I keep under the impression they have a secret one of those for AVD that makes it better, and they keep working on that, and everybody else just gets, regular old RDP. Am I totally off, or is that how it's really happening?
Well, they keep modifying it. They do have a special version of RDP specifically for AVD, and they have added some nice enhancements to that. Namely, the 2 that have been added from a performance perspective is one being the ability to log into multiple AVD environments with different accounts, which was super helpful. And then, more recently, a short path protocol to speed up performance to an extent. But I think customers are looking for maybe a little more performance, put into either the RDP protocol directly or maybe a little bit different, right? We do partner with other vendors for high graphic intensive graphics. So the time will tell to see if they go that route or if they leave it to their partners to do it.
And historically, they have left it to their partners, but the AVD addressable need and their need to create, Azure desktop workloads running in Azure is just too great to leave that out there and require a third party to make it work well. And in my opinion, I have to assume you feel the same way.
I do.
The other one that's not on here that I want to ask you about real quick is Azure Stack HCI. I think that has come to fruition and that is real. Are you seeing people start to look at that?
We have a handful of customers running Nerdio Manager on HCI with AVD. It's kind of a niche product for the Microsoft side. Not a huge adoption for it, just because of the nature of it, right? Where the customer has to purchase their own equipment, which can be somewhat pricey. And so it's kind of one of those niche, areas where I think when I was originally over at Microsoft, the conversation was around, well, just imagine if you're an oil worker on a rig out in the Gulf, right? With very minimal bandwidth, you'd like to do some processing on the rig. So for those kind of areas, it's great. I've had a number of customers in the past that just wanted to have an Azure presence in their own data center. So the way HCI actually looks to the environment is effectively just another region, albeit a private region for that individual customer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I do know a partner out there. In fact, I may be looking at him in my reflection here that would go out and basically buy the HCI, the Azure Stack for the customer, so they don't have that big upfront CapEx lift. I've been waiting for that opportunity to do that. I think that's doable, where the customer doesn't have to, doesn't have to buy that hardware. I'm excited about finding that scenario somewhere we can figure out a good way to go solve that on behalf of Microsoft, Nerdio, and the customer, and make it, still make it an OpEx discussion.
That'll be nice. Also, fact, to mention, go ahead.
Well, I say we're already doing that in some cases with different platforms. I got to get my pulse on the Azure Stack HCI world and figure out a way to take that thing to market.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little difficult. It didn't take off as quick as I think Microsoft originally wanted, but I agree with you. It's catching on, but slowly.
Yeah. All right. So August 2022 updates around AVD. We'll knock these out real quick. Let me share my screen so you know exactly which ones I'm looking at. Sorry about that. Thought I already did. And just for our listeners, these things are also going to go on our YouTube channel. In fact, they have been. They're probably a few weeks behind at this point. My college interns went back to college on me. Dadgummit. But as we get our interns back, they'll get these videos posted up so people can see what we're talking about. But the first one is updates to preview version of FSLogix profiles for Azure AD joined VMs. So it's really, we're just talking updates to FSLogix for Azure joined VMs.
Correct.
And just for our listeners, hopefully most of them know this, but you don't have to. And there's been a long history of users that were joined to Azure AD, but the machines themselves, the device objects being in Azure AD, has not been around that long, has it?
It hasn't. It's relatively new in this last year.
Yeah. The Azure AD really started off about identity management, and now the machine user identity management, now machine identity becomes, part of that story. And of course, we want that to work with FSLogix in such a way that these profiles can be managed from Azure AD, because why not?
Yeah, they still have a little. I think there's still a little bit of work to be done, especially if you're looking to do FSLogix with application masking. Azure Domain Join doesn't currently, I should say FSLogix doesn't currently support Azure Domain Join for application masking. So let's hope they get that updated and have that new capability.
Do you have any success stories with people using app masking? So there's lots of app virtualization technologies out there. The granddaddy of all, like the app presentation virtualization. But then there's application masking, where you put the apps in the image, you just don't let people see it unless they've been allowed to see it. Have you seen customers taking advantage of that?
I'd say about 25% of my customers taking advantage of it. And the idea, like you said, is to be able to deploy the app within your image and just hide those things that are for one reason or another. Typically, it's because the customer has a limited set of licenses, and so they want to limit it, the availability to those users. but about 25% of our customers are using that. You still end up, if you used app masking across the board, you could end up, in all honesty, with a very, very large image if you deployed everything. So I see a combination of splitting up those images for different workloads, along with app masking on a smaller scale than you otherwise could do.
And you still have the world of application conflicts, even though, as long as you don't try to jam 100 apps in a single image, these days you don't get a whole lot of that, I don't think, do you?
You don't, and when you run into those situations, that's one of the marquee reasons why you would maybe look at going with MSIX App Attach for those applications that don't necessarily play well with others.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, let's go to the next one. Single sign-on and passwordless authentication now in Windows Insider Preview. What does this mean?
So, from what I am aware of, this is where they're adding some features and capabilities within Windows to take the user's login and utilize it further down the road. It's in Insider Preview, so I haven't really had much interaction with it at this point, but I have seen some articles and some webcasts from, say, Azure Academy on YouTube that has gone over this. It's an interesting thing. It's which if you or anybody watching hasn't seen Azure Academy, go take a look at it on YouTube. You'll learn a lot of new things that are coming down and or currently out for AVD.
So is this passwordless authentication? That's kind of like maybe kiosk and what do we used to call those? Anonymous connections?
No, they're not anonymous. No, they're using the credentials that the user is logged in with. I wish I had more information on that, but that's kind of all I know at this point.
Okay. Well, and the single sign-on, that means like I log into the environment and then I don't get prompted again when I hit the desktop?
For sure. Okay.
All right. Okay, printing. People still print, right?
They do. Interesting that it's now in Windows Insider Preview. I haven't seen this from an update perspective, but I know Universal Print's been around for a while, so I'm not quite up to speed on that one yet.
Okay. And basically, this has to be like a universal driver scenario in Azure so that you get that printing experience that allows almost anything to be able to print to whatever that print device is.
Right. And so they're still working with manufacturers to get support for universal print, and they have been for the last year or so. And this just may be the next revision of it.
Yeah, it's, printing still comes up, and almost everybody prints. I'm probably as digital as they come, and I still print occasionally. And you got to be able to. Auto scale for pooled host pools now generally available. So auto scale for pooled host pools. So those will be non-persistent pools of desktops. I guess in tech preview is now full on allowed, full on supported, right?
Yeah, I love how they reuse the name autoscale. If I'm not mistaken, Nerdio started out utilizing that name and they may be causing a little bit of confusion because I believe it's still called scaling plans within AVD, which may be what they're referring to.
Okay.
Which has been around in preview for quite some time. So
I think what you're highlighting is people like Nerdio have had this for AVD for quite a while.
That is correct.
All right. Last one is Azure Virtual Desktop with Trusted Launch Update. What does that mean?
So that's for those environments and customers that are looking for a much more secure boot with a virtual TPM chip on the environment. And that's an evolving process. We do support that as well. We're evolving with it as well as some of the trusted launch is morphing almost on a monthly basis a little bit. as they tweak it. So more and more customers are looking to have a more a secure boot up for their AVD VMs, and that will address that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for the Microsoft official updates to AVD in August of 2022. Greg, I haven't even looked yet. I'm going to jump over to the Nerdio. It's kind of like it's like
Christmas.
It's gonna be, I have no idea what's over here. So I have no idea how many, and I have no idea which specific ones we're going to talk about. So just a quick scroll.
Yeah, we have about 19, I think.
Yeah.
Updates. But the big ones are obviously going to have the nice little pretty pictures on them.
Right, so I don't know who the singer was, but start by hitting me with the best shots.
All right. Let's see. So let's start off with AVD, the first one, AVD per user cost reporting.
Yep.
So this is going to be a huge value to many, many customers. It's a Nerdio premium feature. And this is where Nerdio will provide you the information around your VMs and OS disk cost, your FS logic storage, your network egress fees, and a number of other things that don't necessarily fall into a particular category, right? And so we can collect all that information and give you effectively 3 different types of reports. And it does work across subscriptions within the same tenant. So with that, the 3 reports are going to be proportional. So the proportional report is going to provide you a cost allocation with a higher amount of cost to those users that log in more versus a lower cost to the users that log in less. We also offer a uniform report where it takes the overall cost of your AVD environment and divides it up evenly amongst all of the users that have logged in. And then the third option would be just straight up unallocated, right? So you'll get your overall AVD cost, your per user cost, as well as a breakdown of each individual user. So for each user, you'll get their total cost plus their VM cost, their storage cost, their network cost, and all those things, right? So you'll be able to break that down, download those in a CSV format, and charge back or do whatever you'd like from a billing perspective internally, or just to keep track of the environment.
So, Greg, I feel like we talked about some of that last time. Was that in preview mode last time, and this is the go live, or was it limited last time we talked about it?
It was very limited last time. So last month, it was in private preview that we were only offering it to select customers. In version 4.3, which is expected to drop this week, it will be publicly available preview option. So you won't have to ask us to give you the secret sauce and commands to enable it anymore.
And this says available in what version? Premium feature. Premium
version of 4.3.
So premium edition of version 4.3.
That is correct.
And Greg, remind me real quick, what are the different editions?
So we have a standard edition and we have a premium edition. Mm-hmm. And kind of the highlights between the two: with premium, you get the ability, obviously, for user cost reporting. You'll get management over your log analytics workspace. You'll get the ability to add custom RBAC rules within Nerdio and some other things, along with split deployments. So if you need to deploy between a commercial and a gov tenant, that's a premium feature. And then we have some additional Windows 365 license management features in that premium as well, and some other really smaller ones, but those are really the big ones for the premium edition.
Okay. Greg, what next feature that came out in 4.3?
So the next one we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go kind of down the list here. Personal host pool auto shrink. So last month we released Personal Host Pool Auto Grow. Okay. This month we've added Auto Shrink to Personal Host Pools, effectively saying delete the VM if the user hasn't logged in within the specified amount of time that you set for the environment. So that way you're not deploying a virtual machine for a user and having to consume those resources with the user never logging in. So another cost-saving measure that Nerdio has provided, along with the time management saving of the auto grow feature.
And you can set that between 1 and 990 days. How do you figure that out?
I mean, typically you're not going to go that far. I mean, if somebody hasn't logged in within 60 days, to be honest with you, they probably aren't going to log in after that. And if they do, they might as well ask for a new a VM at that point, right? Because they didn't use it the first time.
Yeah. Do you have any real world examples of where you've seen this be something that people needed? They realized, 6 months later that they've created all these desktops and these people never use them?
We have quite a few customers that have actually asked for this specific request for that very reason, right? They think they know, and they've been given kind of how many users that they should expect, and they deploy that level of resources, and come to find out that they don't, and they have to go manually, remove those users. It's also, sometimes arduous to have to go look through the environment manually to determine how long somebody has actually not logged in, right? This automates that process automatically for you. We know when the last time that user logs in, and if it's greater than the time we've allotted, we take care of it for you.
And Greg, you said this is for personal. Pooled, that's irrelevant, right?
For pooled, it is irrelevant. We have we don't necessarily have auto shrink. The problem with a pooled environment isn't so much that you've over provisioned it. The vast majority of the time it's because you've under provisioned the pool. So that's not necessarily a request that we've seen on the pooled side because like I said, the problem is typically flip flop from a personal pool.
Right.
Customers are a lot more at tune with their pooled environments typically because they're trying to save as much money as possible with the resources that are provided. So you'll typically see those skinny down far more than a personal pool, right?
That's a lot easier to maintain and measure, kind of like inventory kind of thing where you could see it growing and shrinking.
Exactly. I mean, in a pooled environment, you could end up with 1 or 2 extra VMs. In a personal host pool, you can end up with 20, 30, 40, 50 extra VMs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, what's next on the hit parade here?
So our next is the addition of automatic backups and restoring session host, either the long way or the short way. So we do support instant restores through snapshots or full restores directly from a recovery services vault. And this will give users, if they have the permissions, the ability to restore some of their own personal VMs as well.
Yeah,
and you'll see that. You'll see that option down below it as well.
And this is using the ability to back these up within Azure?
Correct. So there's 2 types of backups within Azure, kind of an instant backup where it's just a snapshot. And then there's a full Azure backup that puts it into a recovery services vault. That process is a bit lengthier in time. So it could take typically, an hour to an hour and a half to actually get it fully backed up, and then up to 15 hours to get it restored. Now, you can certainly call and open a ticket with Microsoft to have that sped up, but it's a manual process. The backups into a recovery services vault are really meant for more of a long-term need rather than a instant turnaround. And so what we've done is added the ability to do both. Take advantage of both features within Azure, the instant and the full backup.
Nice. Well, I can imagine in the personal side, that's a huge win for the end user.
It kind of, sort of, it is. You got to remember on the personal VMs, if they restore it, they're going to lose everything they've done, right? So it's beware of what you do.
Yeah. Well, they're going to lose it as of the last backup.
That is correct. That is correct.
Which in many cases in my life, and I'm sure yours, like if I could have just put this back where it was last night before I started looking at it.
Yeah, more times than I can count myself.
And the truth is, it was something I broke, not something that broke me more often than not.
Right. Next thing that we've added is the addition of FS Logic's Office containers. I don't necessarily see a lot of customers in AVD really separating off their Office containers from their profile within AVD, but there are those customers that do configure it that way. And because of that, we now offer the ability to add that configuration alongside of your profile configuration. And essentially what this does is it takes your Office products in the cache files, right? Your OST and whatnot for email, and offloads that to a completely separate profile disk to theoretically help with performance. Again, I don't see it used a lot, but we do have some customers that have and have asked for it. And so now they can configure that directly through Nerdio rather than having to manually configure that on their environment.
Right.
Our next one is going to be Azure Resource Graph API optimization. Now, this is not necessarily one that every customer is really going to see. If you're a very large install-based customer of AVD, this may very well be of high utilization for you. So we have quite a few customers that are tens of thousands of end users and utilizing AVD. And when you get environments that large, you start running into performance problems specifically with the Azure infrastructure. And so what we've done is added this capability to use the Graph API service, kind of a cache for those large customers, so that we don't just hit Azure with all of the requests all at once. You can put it in this, we put it in effectively this queue that will slowly submit the request in a more reasonable fashion for those larger environments. Okay. And then we have the self-service for end user restore. You can define whether or not all users can re-image their their desktops or certain individuals, but it adds it's a premium feature as well. So this is something we typically, or I'll put it this way, this is something we expect to see in more of a development environment, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not really something I would necessarily say give to your everyday end user, because they could really hurt themselves from a deployment perspective or lose data. This is really put in for those development environments that are doing testing, and when they're done with the testing, they just want to do a quick restore and run a different test, right? And that's primarily where the request came from, and that's where I expect to see it utilized the most.
Yeah, I could really use this myself every now and then. When I've got my own lab environment, but I can't keep the thing up to date. I just can't. But knowing that I could play in AVD with this feature at my fingertips would just be extremely powerful. Next one in here says self-service in-user desktop reimage. Is that? I guess this is part of the. Is that part of the same thing? Hey, Greg, you're on mute now.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't dug into both of those just yet, but they're very, very similar.
I'm trying to read through the verbiage here just to figure out what the differences are. Oh, is that like reimage from the gold image?
That is correct. It's very similar. It's very similar.
It just takes you back to snapshot number one, basically.
Correct.
All right, we want to keep going here. We got a few more minutes, and you've got a handful of things left. Any specific ones you want to highlight?
Well, some of the niceties. First off, is the global. So we've added some additional custom views between 8 and 11 options that you see on the page, where we're actually going to present some additional custom views for customers up front to help help them out of the box with some more capabilities, right, within Nerdio that are already there, but we're just going to bring them more to the forefront.
So it's just as far as, I don't understand what you mean.
So these are custom views, right? So you can create a custom view for all of your remote apps, or for your session host, and that type of thing, right? So we're providing some additional features or additional views in that perspective, and bringing them from a default installation out up front rather than having to go install and then go configure them. We have found that customers didn't necessarily know about the custom views, and so we're bringing them to the forefront to really shine a light on it a little more as well.
Pre-packaging some of these views. Now, are these views for the administrators or views for the end users?
Either or.
Okay. Well, I thought I answered my question to myself. So the administrators, what do end users see in a Nerdio world? They just, they're going to never. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, they're not, end users aren't necessarily going to see it, but you could have other levels of administration that may see it, right?
Got it.
And then we've also added an enhanced searching capability. So this is more of if I'm not mistaken, more of a global search throughout the system. And then it'll highlight, as you can see, the search when it finds it on the page. So just an enhancement to the overall search capabilities within Nerdio itself.
Got it. Okay.
One of the things that we've run across is when we ingest existing environments, is having to select significant numbers of networks and resource groups that have to get linked. So this is a nice little enhancement from a deployment perspective, allowing you to link multiple resource groups and networks up front rather than having to do them one at a time. It speeds up deployment, ease of use.
Greg, how often is it you're ingesting an existing AVD environment versus starting from scratch with somebody?
It's about 50 or 60% of the time, if not more than, if not maybe a little more than that. We often see existing customers, so we'll have those customers reach out to us that have deployed AVD. They get frustrated with the level of management and overhead associated with it, and they reach out to us. And when we jump in, they're like pleasantly surprised, obviously, because of the ease of use and the automation. But yeah, probably I'd say 60% at least.
So I have to assume there's plenty of people out there that jump into the AVD world thinking, okay, this is just going to be point and click and get it done, and they find out somewhere in the deployment it's not, or somewhere during the maintenance it's not, and that's when you guys come to the rescue.
Right. And what we see more and more these days really is when Microsoft gets an AVD customer, they just quite often, those customers will ask them, well, do you have any partners that do this? And first thing they say is, yes, we do, Nerdio. Yeah. And so we are seeing less existing and more new, but still about 60% of the time, they're existing customers.
Yeah, I was going to make a joke. You guys are like the cherry on top, but to be honest, you guys are the ice cream and the icing and the cherry on top.
Everything.
It's just a pound cake if you don't have that stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. And then the last remaining couple items, we've done some automatic updates for the FS Logics agent, added some Windows 11 update scripted action, as well as hosting a disaster recovery host pool without the use of FS Logics. So we have ran across a number of customers that are using Cloud Cache and they're doing DR scenarios, but don't necessarily want to use Cloud Cache in that situation. And so we've gone from prior to this release, requiring Cloud Cache for DR to making Cloud Cache optional in a DR scenario.
That sounds interesting. Is there any way you can describe why they would want to not bring that stuff with them in the DR moment?
So our DR solution with Cloud Cache is an evolution of what we have available to us from within the AVD environment, right? And Cloud Cache introduces some additional storage cost, obviously, as well as a bit of latency for the end user. And so this option was put in so that you can disable Cloud Cache and have a manual or automated external process of effectively just copying those user profiles from point A to point B, getting the same result without the additional latency.
Okay, that does make sense. Just bring it over when you need it.
Yep. And pretty much the last one's going to really be the FS Logics and AVD agent updated versions. Now, some of your users listening to this may look at that and go, well, FS Logics hotfix, that's great. However, interesting, version 104.739.1000 for the agent. They may look and go, well, but that's not the current release, and they would be correct. Okay. The current release, we have been unable to find a way to actually download it. Okay. So 5100 is the current release. This is the latest version that's been made available for download and update. Outside of that, Azure automatically updates those once they get deployed anyway. So it's not as big of an issue because as soon as it gets deployed, it can update itself unless you set a schedule within Azure or Nerdio to a specific maintenance window timeframe. But the idea here is the previous version of the 104 release had a pretty big bug in it. And so at least this way, Microsoft has provided that version, this particular version available to us that we can start installing and bypass that original bug that they had in the last major release.
One of the things I really think about whenever I have these calls with you guys is the idea that if you go AVD, you're kind of going all by yourself, and you don't really have that I guess tour guide to kind of help you see what's there that you would miss all by yourself. And you guys really, through the magic of software, bring those things to the surface and help people who are adopting AVD not necessarily feel like they're doing it alone.
We do. We incredibly simplify the process, but that being said, it is still quite important for customers to understand kind of what is going on in the background, because you got to remember Nerdio is managing the deployment of the infrastructure, but not necessarily the virtual machines and the OS and within the OS, right? So, Nerdio can't affect really the RDP client in any form or fashion, or the AVD gateway that the users log into. So we do make it super simple from a deployment perspective, but it is also very important that customers understand the underlying technology to better understand, which direction to go when they do run into some of those issues.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I think we've got to the end of this. I appreciate you jumping on with us every week or every month and going through the Microsoft updates and then kicking their butt with the Nerdio updates. You guys are really just like we said earlier, rounding out those edges for them, and I'm sure they don't mind, right? They love Microsoft's always been a company that relied on partners like you, partners like us, to ultimately help users get into the game and to the finish line.
And keep in mind, we're trying to stick pretty strictly to new release 15th of every month.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have plenty of
our
plenty to get done.
Our backlog is huge with all the requests. Absolutely.
Well, what you're doing there, you're just making it harder and harder for anybody to catch you. You guys are so out front with all these things that make it more functional. Somebody would really, I don't know how anybody would begin to catch up.
It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be easy.
The only way would be to acquire you guys, which I don't know if you're for sale or not, but I'm sure plenty of people are looking.
Not anytime soon, I hope. Yeah, we're having too much fun over here. Nerdio is a great place to work at, so I'm having to stick it out as long as we can.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I appreciate it, and we'll do it again next month.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.